There was once a time where you could be proud to be an Englishman. And I'm not talking about some weird superiority type way. I'm just talking about just being proud to have the label Englishman, to be proud to be part of, a member of our country and how it works and how it operates, playing our small part in some way, knowing that there are other people playing different parts, bigger parts, but that we're all of the same kin, of the same country, of the same purpose and mission, and that we were all in some way on trajectory together to build country and serve community and serve one another. And there was a time that you could be proud to be an Englishman. But as time goes on, it really does become more and more difficult to be proud of the label Englishman. It really, really does, because we now share that label with people like this, with people like Keir Starmer, with people like Mandelson, and that is a label that we have in common, and it's a label therefore that is now tarred. People say, "Oh, what tarred the name? What tarred the label Englishman? Oh, well, the colonialism tarred Englishness and tarred the label." Well, did it? Maybe it did a bit. Certainly. In times gone by, but now today, the actions of today, what is now tarring the name of what it is to be part of our country, UK, Britain, England, whichever one you want to go for. I know there are differences there, but for these purposes, let's not focus on them. Where is the tar coming from now? This guy, these guys, this political class. We can no longer take pride in that label because we share it with these people, and that's really sad. That's really sad. And so what is happening? Well, more Epstein files released, and if you need information, if you want to get the lowdown on what's contained within, then I suggest that you find a different video from a channel who's going to go into more depth and more detail on that. Carl Benjamin, Lotus Eaters, gives the headlines, really very good. But TLDR is this: more Epstein files released, implicating senior British politicians in weird cults on islands, but also dodgy dealings, illegal trading of state secrets. It's all going on. It's all in there. Everyone knew about it. And here's the thing: the saddest truth of this whole thing, if you take out the weirdness, if you take out the treason, the treachery, if you take it all out for a second, because we can sometimes hyper focus on the specifics of any given thing, and we should do. And I'm not saying that we should ignore the details by any stretch of the imagination. We should go into the details, or someone should go into the details, and with a fine-tooth comb, forensically, and hold individuals to account. But if you just zoom out for a second and look at what's going on in society now, in the culture, in the conversation, right? Nobody's really that surprised. It simply doesn't require anyone to stretch their imagination too far to believe that this is happening, to consider that senior members of our British political class are involved in such things. It's just not surprising. Did you hear? Apparently, the Prime Minister knew that his previously disgraced ambassador to the US was selling state secrets to a guy that operates a sex island where other politicians pay to have sex with children. Oh, yeah, heard about that. Yeah, no surprises there. Anyway, did you see the finale of Traitors? That's the conversation. That's the conversation, because this just isn't a surprise to anyone. And that is the saddest thing. That's the state of our country. And not just our country, the West in general. But we're talking about our country because that's the one we live in, and that's the one we care about trying to, save. Is that the word? I think so. But we were once famed. We were once famed for leading an empire upon which the sun never set. And, maybe that was bad, maybe that was evil. Certainly some professors at some universities somewhere will tell you that it was, and it wasn't all good. Absolutely, it had dark aspects as well. Very much, but it had good parts, and regardless of the ethical and moral implications of it, you still can't argue that it was a feat of governmental and military success across the world, and we defeated the Nazis and we ended slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. Anyway, they're still doing it in other countries over the Middle East, but we ended the transatlantic slave trade at great cost to ourselves. We have an incredible history in our country, some good, some bad, and now we have this. Now our borders are wide open to people who are bringing in an ideology that we have spent the last 1,400 years keeping at bay, which, by the way, absolutely hates us, and which, by the way, we pay to import. We are paying to give away our own territory to appease a different regime that has long since been adversarial to us. We are impoverishing ourselves with an absolutely insane drive to reduce our already minuscule carbon footprint to zero, or rather just actually exporting our carbon emissions to another country so that we can feel better about it. And our leaders are involved in weird sex islands and the selling of state secrets. The discrepancy between where we were and where we are is just insane. It is just insane. And, but as I say, the saddest thing is that the depravity and corruption amongst these people, amongst the elites, is so normalized at this point that none of it even matters. None of it even matters. Remember a few months ago when it came out, the decades-long rumours about widespread gangs all over the country were proven to be true. That Tommy Robinson, who had been banging this drum for years about horrific things that were happening to kids and being covered up by institutions in our country, and it finally came out. Brought into the public sphere by some significantly brave journalists, and also importantly some well-timed tweets by Elon Musk of all people, who brought this into the public sphere. It could no longer be ignored, and so what happened? Nothing has happened. Not a single thing has happened. No one is in prison. No one is on trial. No one has been fired. Nothing has happened. And yet the problem continues, by the way. The problem continues. Children are still being kidnapped, still being assaulted. Today it is happening. And now, seemingly Rupert Lowe is the only person who's actually pursuing justice for these kids. Apart from that, it's forgotten. It's done. It's over. And the Epstein business as well, and Starmer's involvement, or not just Starmer, but the political class's involvement with Epstein, with the Mandelson, with the dodgy dealings, it too will soon be forgotten. Will Mandelson go to prison? I doubt it. Some people say, maybe he will. I doubt it. Will Starmer be removed? I doubt it. Hopefully, but I doubt it. Will the rot that exists in the political class, and I mean on both sides, this is a non-partisan issue. Will the rot in the political class be investigated? Of course not. Of course not. For something to be investigated, there needs to be an investigator, right? And who would that be? The police? Police can investigate. Well, they've hardly covered themselves in glory recently, have they? Covering up the aforementioned gangs, lest they be accused of harming. What do they say? Community cohesion, right? Because it's far more important that two warring ideologies with vastly differing values on particularly the dignity of human life and human individual rights. It's far more important that these two warring ideologies don't clash than it is for the children in the country to be safe. Okay, so let's turn away from that. They've turned away from that, the police, and instead they're arresting people for hurty words on the internet. Maybe the civil service will investigate. Of course, known to be the bastion of representation for the people of the UK. But, these people are more concerned with shutting down any plan to curb illegal immigration, lest we, prevent a terrorist from enjoying their international human right to the right kind of chicken nuggets. No, it will not be investigated, and it will go away as quickly as it came. And in a few months, some new scandal will appear. More outrage will come. Maybe a protest or two if the weather isn't too bad. And then it will just die down again. And the cycle of scandal, outrage, scandal, outrage, scandal, outrage continues. And so what do we do about it? What do we do about it? What do you and I in the pleb class, the ones who do not walk the corridors of power and yet whose lives are managed to a greater degree day by day, I might add, by the decisions and the goings on in the corridor of power. What do you and I do about it? Well, we need to stop. We need to take a minute to breathe and start to think about things logically for a second, because the ebb and the flow of political scandal, the politicians, the elites, ignoring the demos, the people, and regarding us with utter contempt, it continues. Here's my thought, and perhaps I'm being crazy here. The entire political class, the people in those institutions, the political class as it stands needs to be entirely eviscerated, and I don't mean physically, and I don't mean violently, but the institution that is there needs to be eviscerated. Otherwise, this cycle will continue ad infinitum until civil war, civil unrest takes over. And I think it would be super ideal if that doesn't happen. I don't think a violent uprising is a good idea in general. When you take all things into account, I think it will be best avoided. But how, when it doesn't seem to matter who we vote for, we get the same thing? We get 14 years of sleaze and corruption from the blue corner. And then the same thing happened before that from the Reds, and now obviously it's back in full force. So what do? We need to dismantle the system while still operating within it. We need to identify what options do we have that sit inside the constructed system that we have. As I say, tearing it down violently is not. It's not a good idea. It's not. It's like super duper last resort. Like it's already, we just shouldn't do that. If at all possible, we need to avoid these outcomes. If we can, and I think we can. I think we still can. There are other peaceful options still available to us, but we need to identify what are those options that sit inside the system that oppresses us, but outside of the sleaze and corruption that's very evidently, just abhorrent. We need to put our votes to work before it's too late. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that we're just going to have to start to understand at scale, and it's already happening. It is already happening, but we can't vote for the establishment parties anymore. It's too risky at this point. At this point, voting for the political parties as we see them in the state that they are, with the history that they have, with the institutional rot and the systematic rot that exists within them, we can't continue to vote for them. It's like turkeys voting for Christmas to vote for any of them, for certainly for either one of the main two, because it's proven time and time again to be to our detriment. Conservative, Labour, they're out. They need to be out, and there's already strong evidence to suggest that is the case. But there's still Conservatives are like 15%. 15%? How are 15% of the country still voting for these people? And Labour, weren't they hovering around 20%? 20% of the country, 1 in 5 people in the UK. I mean, it's probably gone down now since all this has come out. But 1 in 5 people in the UK before this thought that Labour were still a good option. It's just insane. And so who does that leave? Let's assume that we're no longer voting for our own demise via the Uniparty. Who does that leave? What options are available to us? Well, we've got the Lib Dems, but of course, really they're too close to the establishment. Nobody really knows what they believe. They don't really have anything significant. They're kind of like watered down Tories, or rather Tories are more like the Lib Dems. They just kind of exist in this sort of weird, it's almost like the hedge in the sand. They just don't really live in the real world. They just don't really know what's going on. But at the same time, they're too close to the establishment. So Lib Dems, they're out. We can't do the Lib Dem thing anymore. And then we've got Reform. Well, we could do Reform. 2 issues with Reform. Obviously, half the people think Reform are far right, which is just totally insane. It's completely mental that people consider the Thatcherite Nigel Farage to be far right. It's beyond all sense. I don't even know how you arrive at that conclusion. But actually, my issue with Farage is actually far more the other way. That Farage appears to edge closer and closer to the very same political class that he spent his life decrying. So Reform, and particularly with all these defections from the Tories recently. I mean, Robert Jenrick, he's our MP. I actually think he's all right. He seems to be anyway. I think his shift is genuine. I think his transition from a left wing Tory opening up the floodgates to illegal immigration and ideology that hates us to where he is now. I think it's genuine. I actually do. But the others, some of the others are just like, what? Why are we importing? Why is Reform? Why is Farage importing the failed politicians from the failed Tory government into? I mean, so for me, I think Reform is just getting closer and closer to the very thing that we need to be fighting. Now then we've got the Greens, and I'm fairly sure Zach Polanski is out of the weird corruption bubble that exists within the political elite. So that's a good thing, largely because I think he's too stupid to be involved with it. But it's a good option as far as avoiding political sleaze and the weird sex island thing is concerned. Zach Polanski is a good option. Assuming that you think money is free and you think the UK should soon be adopting Sharia law, voting for the Green Party is a good way to go. Happy days. And then there are some others. There are some outliers, and this is where I think we need to be turning our attention. I really do. There's Ben Habib from Advance. They're not even in the polls at the moment. They just don't register there. I think their membership is like 40,000, was it, or something like that. Ben Habib is not a politician, and this is good. He's not a politician. He's a businessman. Now, obviously, he's not from the weird island thing, and he doesn't support the ideological surrender of the UK, and so Ben Habib, Advance, good option. And then there's Rupert Lowe, who's at the moment is not representing any political party, but I think he's the best option that we have for Prime Minister. And another person who again is a businessman, He's only entered politics. And the great thing about Rupert Lowe, he's not in politics to make money because he's already got money. And so he can't be bought. He can't be, paid for. Like Mandelson selling state secrets for 75 grand or whatever it was. Rupert Lowe doesn't need your 75 grand. He's got his own 75 grand. He's got plenty of money. He's not in politics for the money. And so that is a good thing because he can't be corrupted in that way. Anyway. And then, we're all susceptible to some level of corruption at some stage. But the risk for people like Rupert Lowe is lower, which is good. He's just entered politics from the business world just to try and help. And I think that's a good thing. I really do. And maybe you're thinking, "Wow, that's racist." Or we can't put someone in number 10 who doesn't fully support illegal open borders and the ever-growing influence of Islam in the UK. We can't do that. And that's great. If you're of that view, then marvelous. If he's not to your taste. If Ben Habib is not to your taste, or these other emerging politicians that aren't from the political class, then why don't you put yourself in the running? The top and tail of it is that we need to stop voting for politicians. That I think is the solution. As I said, we need to avoid civil unrest. We need to avoid violence. We need to avoid things going, we're not French, right? We don't just cut people's heads off when things, get a little bit spicy. We need to avoid that. But we need to also stop voting for politicians and start putting our own people into politics. Normal, everyday people from normal, everyday life. Not these same reprobates who perform attacks on each other, either at Eton or Depravity Island, and then come and fill the holes at Westminster. We need to be done with this. We need to be done with this. I don't want a politician in number 10 anymore. I don't want a politician in number 10 anymore. I want a normal person, and these people, they are not normal. It's getting late on in the day. The sun is setting on the UK. I don't believe it has to. I don't believe it's curtains. It doesn't have to be. But unless we can install normal people into the system, then the system will have to come down. And it won't be pretty. It will be far better if we can avoid that.